It was one of those quiet mornings when the sun had just begun to stretch its golden fingers across the fields, and the smell of dew mixed with dust rose from the earth like an old hymn. I hadn't been back to my ranch in nearly 15 years. Life, duty, and responsibility had kept me on the road and away from the place I had once called home. My boots felt heavier than I remembered as I stepped out of the truck, gazing at the land that had shaped me. A wide sweep of rolling hills, fences long weathered by wind, and the barn that seemed to be leaning against time itself. I was home, though much had changed. The ranch had been in my family for generations. My grandfather had worked this land with his own hands, building it fence by fence, post by post, a man who believed in hard work and God's timing. My father carried that legacy, though he never cared much for words. His lessons were in the way he tightened a rope, the way he never left a gate unlatched, the way he greeted neighbors with a nod instead of a speech. When he passed, the land had waited quietly for me, even as I got pulled into a life of rules, meetings, and boardrooms far away from the dust and cattle. 15 years is a long time to be gone, though. The town had grown, and worse, an HOA had sprawled its reach all the way out to where my ranch sat. At first, I didn't notice it. The quiet had a way of softening everything. I walked the fence line, ran my hand along the worn posts, and breathed in that country silence. But then I saw the signs. Literally, bright white HOA boards on the edge of what used to be open road. Community guidelines enforced. One read. Another said, violations will result in fines. I chuckled at first, shaking my head at the absurdity. My ranch predated all of this by nearly a century. Nobody had the right to tell me what I could or couldn't do on my own land. But not everyone saw it that way. It started small. A woman with cropped blonde hair, tight as a drum, walked up the gravel path to where I stood. She had a clipboard clutched in one hand and a frown that seemed carved into her face. I could tell before she opened her mouth who she was. One of those HOA leaders, the self-appointed kind who wore authority like a crown. "You can't park that truck here," she said, pointing at my vehicle. "It violates community parking guidelines." I laughed, thinking she must have been joking. "Ma'am," I said, tipping my hat out of old habit, "this here's my ranch. Been in my family longer than your neighborhoods, probably been standing. I'll park my truck wherever the ground will hold it." Her lips tightened. "That's not how this works. You're in violation already. You'll need to move the truck, remove that old barn, and ensure your fencing complies with code." Something about the way she said it. It wasn't a request. It was a threat. And in that moment, I realized the ranch I had returned to wasn't the one I had left. My neighbors weren't farmers or ranchers anymore. They were HOA members, governed by rules written in fine print and enforced by people like her. I told her politely to leave my property. She didn't like that one bit. Her eyes narrowed, and she scribbled furiously on her clipboard before storming back down the gravel drive. I thought that would be the end of it, but folks like her don't stop at words. The very next morning, I was greeted not by the birdsong or the wind in the grass, but by the flashing lights of a sheriff's cruiser pulling into my driveway. The deputy stepped out, calm but cautious, and said, "Sir, we got a call about a trespasser refusing to comply with community standards." HOA representative filed a complaint. I looked past him and saw her again, arms crossed, standing tall behind him like she had summoned the law itself. Now here's the thing. What Karen, yes, that was her name, didn't know was that in the years I'd been gone, I hadn't just been working in offices or pushing papers. I had been part of the federal task force overseeing housing regulations and homeowner associations nationwide. I had sat in the meetings where policy was written, where laws were drafted, where authority was signed into existence. In fact, I had been placed at the very top of it, the one who signed off on every major HOA charter across the country. Simply put, there wasn't an HOA in America that didn't answer, in some way or another, to me. So I looked at the deputy, calm as ever, and said, "Son, you might want to check the county records before you do anything here. This land has never fallen under HOA jurisdiction. And as for her complaint, well, let's just say she's barking up a tree that don't belong to her." The deputy raised his brow, stepped aside, and radioed in. It didn't take long before confusion turned to embarrassment. He handed me back my license and said, "Sir, she doesn't have authority over your property. Looks like your ranch is exempt." I apologized for the inconvenience. Karen's face burned red. She started shouting about how the rules applied to everyone, how no one was above the HOA. Her voice carried across the yard like a crow's call, shrill and unrelenting. But here's the truth. Authority only works when people recognize it. And I didn't. I walked up to her, slow and steady, and said, "Ma'am, let me make something clear. You call the cops on me in my own home. You try to use power that doesn't belong to you. But what you don't know is that I oversee every HOA in this country. You may run this little neighborhood, but the rules you cling to, they were signed off on my desk, and I can unmake them just as easily." She didn't believe me at first. People rarely believe the quiet man until he shows his hand. So I showed her. I pulled out documents I had brought with me, records, signatures, proof of oversight. Her face went pale. The clipboard slipped from her fingers. She sputtered something about just following guidelines before storming off in silence. Word spread fast. Neighbors who had once whispered about me began stopping by, offering pie, shaking hands, apologizing for the trouble. They admitted the HOA had been running the community like a fiefdom, controlling every little thing from mailbox paint to holiday decorations. Most of them hadn't wanted it, but fear has a way of silencing people. They thanked me for standing up, for reminding them that land and freedom are worth more than the comfort of conformity. I spent the next few weeks not just repairing fences and patching the barn roof, but also helping folks learn what they could and couldn't be forced into. We had long talks over coffee and long nights on porches where the cicadas sang backup. Some of them cried, confessing they felt trapped in their own homes, fined for things as small as planting the wrong flower. I told them what my father once told me. A man's home is his castle. Don't let anyone tell you how to guard it. I learned something too. For years, I had buried myself in work, disconnected from the very people I was supposed to be protecting. Coming back to the ranch reminded me why the fight mattered. It wasn't about paperwork or policies. It was about dignity, about a man or woman's right to live in peace on their own land. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned a soft shade of fire, I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea. The ranch was quiet again, the way it had been when I was a boy. I thought of my grandfather, my father, the lessons passed down. Life had a way of circling back, teaching you what you'd forgotten.